Unless you've been living under a rock the last few days, then you have surely heard that Miss Let Them Eat Ice Cream, Nancy Pelosi herself, has been denied communion over her desire to codify Roe v. Wade, just in case the Supreme Court should overturn it. Now, in an era where it seems that all the bishops are either feckless or spineless, one man stands out as a total legend. Yes, this archbishop is exactly the kind of man that we need in the church today. If all the bishops had these kind of cannolis on them, then we would see a very different Catholic church. Okay, I didn't say he was perfect, all right? So has the American public, particularly those on the left who hold separation of church and state in such high esteem, have they respected this decision of the church? Have they said, we don't like it, but we need to keep our nose out of the church's decisions? Have they declared that indeed the church has the right to deny communion to whomever it wishes? No, it has not. And we will explore that today.
The Archbishop of San Francisco is calling for Speaker Nancy Pelosi to be denied receiving communion because of her pro-choice stance. He's one of the priests who also called for President Biden to be denied sacrament.
Oh, this is so embarrassing. Whoopi, I completely forgot what a sacrament is. Can you define that for me so I'm just clear before we go into this discussion? Just to make sure I know what a sacrament is.
This is not your job, dude.
You know who's definitely qualified to tell the people in the church what their jobs are? The woman who has 8 unrepentant abortions and doesn't even practice her own Jewish faith because it's too much work.
That is not up to you to make that decision.
No, that is literally what his job is. Even the priest of the smallest parish, if you walk into his doors and he feels like you're living outside the church teachings or you're causing scandal within the church, he can deny you communion.
You know, what is the saying? It's kind of amazing. But, you know...
She's really digging through her notes to find what she wants to say, so this better be amazing.
What is the point of communion, right? It's for sinners.
Okay.
It's the reward of saints, but the bread of sinners.
Did you just misquote the Pope, who was riffing off of Aquinas? Yes, you did. But what does it mean for the Eucharist to be the bread of sinners? It means that when we faithfully take the Eucharist, as we repent and turn away from our sin, Christ gives us the grace that we need to continue avoiding sin. This is not a Vegas buffet. You don't get to come and eat for cheap so that you can just keep on gambling.
How dare you? How dare you? That is, if Pope Francis says that that's the issue. But see, y'all are going against Pope Francis.
What? Was that even a coherent thought? I mean, I guess the part about us going against Pope Francis is slightly coherent. But despite, I'd say, most people's disagreements with the Pope, they still recognize his authority as Pope and can still hold disagreements with his personal opinions. The Pope is, of course, unapologetically pro-life.
You have your own issues about what's right and wrong in your church.
Pope Francis is not pro-choice.
No.
But he is also against capital punishment. And I don't see anybody denying, what's his name, Abbott, Governor Abbott in Texas, who is a Catholic, he's executed many people.
This is a theme that seems to come up a lot in this discussion. And I'll be addressing it again in this video. But first and foremost, the Pope's opinion on death penalty is separate from the dogmatic teachings of the church. But these people who have no relationship to the church think that they're somehow experts because, I don't know, they're celebrities or something. And they think they can talk to what should and shouldn't be done by the bishops?
It also depends on each archdiocese. So that this is why Nancy could get communion in Georgetown, because that particular archdiocese was okay with it.
So Nancy Pelosi didn't submit to her spiritual authority that she claims to be a part of, and a priest in another diocese overruled the authority of a bishop. They don't see a problem with this. But as Catholics, we should recognize this is a problem.
It's also possible to be personally pro-life and to legislate pro-choice, which is also an option.
You know, it's also possible to be personally abolitionist and legislate pro-slavery. Does that fly?
Because everything I ever learned in church was that eventually you face your maker. It's you yourself face your maker. So your decisions and whatever you believe will be on account. It will not be crossing into everyone else's lane.
This is what happens when you have such a biblically illiterate culture. James explicitly tells us that teachers will be held accountable to how they led others.
The Catholic Church has some stuff to do on themselves.
Didn't you just say to stay in your own lane? Or does that only count in one direction?
And so that has happened over the last decades where we watch they will fight for this cause and yet they will allow people that have been abused by the leaders in their communities, they will shove those stories aside and continue to protect their own in the name of the PR of the church.
If she's referring to the child abuse that happened in the church, yes, that's wrong. The people who abused children should be excommunicated and in prison. And the people who covered it up are just as guilty. But two wrongs don't make a right. Abortion is still a vile evil. As vile as anything those priests did.
That is disgusting to me. And so the fact that, shame on the church, by the way, because communion is also, it's a verb. Eucharist is the noun. Communion is about communing the community of the church, bringing them together.
I guess she's an expert. She's convinced me. We should probably include people like members of the Aryan Brotherhood, the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, maybe even people who kidnap children and sell them into the sex trade. Should we include them in the communion as well?
You were raised Catholic. Joy, you were raised Catholic. You're a devout Catholic. I was raised Catholic, 12 years of Catholic education.
No offense at all to you cradle Catholics. I love you, I respect you, and I look up to you guys. That said, when people try to correct me on the basis of I grew up in the church, usually I know garbage is coming.
The Catholic Church has lost 20% in attendance since the year 2000.
Yeah.
Why?
Because we've decided that looking like the world, sounding like the world, teaching like the world, refusing to catechize our youth and adults, that's the way the church should go. No, we don't have to go back to pre-Vatican II. We don't have to go back to the Latin Mass exclusively. But what we need to do is go back to the foundations of this is our faith. This is where we stand strong. This is what we need to do in the world. We go back to that, the church will explode with members.
Because they're against artificial birth control. They are against in vitro fertilization. They won't give you communion if you're divorced or if you're a gay couple. And because of things like this.
The world hates us because we oppose evil things? What?
And in the meantime, if they really want to protect children, they have tallied 17,000 at least complaints of molestations by priests since the year 1980. They have paid $4 billion or more in settlement claims for pedophilia. So if you want to protect children, Archbishop, instead of sheltering pedophilia, pedophile priests, instead of moving them to other churches without telling the community, instead of protecting them, you should be protecting the children who go get Catholic education in your churches.
Yeah, okay, so we addressed this already. Bad things happen in the church. They need to be punished. It needs to be taken care of. Two evils don't make a right. Just because one evil happened doesn't mean you can say, well, what about this other evil? No, you don't get to do that. Both evils are evil. That said, the Catholic Church is working very hard to make sure this never, ever, ever happens again.
It's only
Yeah.
4%, by the way, I believe.
What?
It's only 4% of the bad priests. 4%.
Four,
let me-
17,000.
That's a lot of people, but
17,000
a lot of people.
I just feel
accuse them.
Look at Joy Bear, keeping things in a little bit of perspective. All right, you gained a little bit of my respect.
I feel it incumbent upon me not to be protecting of the church, but to point out for my own
They're priests.
friends, people I know who are good people.
One is too many.
How many gender-confused individuals assaulting girls in the bathroom is too many? Or does that argument only go in one direction?
Only 4% pedophilia is unacceptable.
Well, of course, it's unacceptable, and the Catholic Church is trying to, come to account with its terrible past of not only abusing children and its pedophilia, but also what it did in many of its missions and with Native American children as well. So there have been a lot of problems with the Catholic Church, and as a devout Catholic, I am really troubled by the Church's history and some of the ongoing issues.
Don't be too troubled, because what was done that is evil, we can say is evil, but most of it has either been outright invented, like this supposed slaughter of the indigenous people by the Catholic Church specifically. Some of it has been removed from its historical context, like the Inquisition, and some of it is outright justified, like the Crusades. That's not going to make me very popular.
But let me say this, I have learned from you ladies on this show, having been here for 5 years, not to politicize my religion.
There are two things that will touch every aspect of your life, no matter how hard you try to avoid it: religion and politics. It is impossible to separate the two. Any claims otherwise are pure fantasy.
Right? And so while I believe that abortion is wrong, and I believe that the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that pro-life extends from conception through natural death.
As a Catholic, we also uphold the rights and personhood and dignity of those who die unnatural deaths, like, car accidents, or people who are executed by the death penalty. Now, she might be trying to implicitly suggest the death penalty is a very anti-Catholic teaching, and it is true that the last couple popes have been opposed to it, and that they've revised the catechism to reflect that. However, dogmatically, the teaching of the Catholic Church has not ruled one way or the other on the death penalty.
The issue that I have with these politicians politicizing their religion is the hypocrisy. Because when you look at the Catholic Church and these bishops, the death penalty, so this includes the death penalty, right?
Oh, I'm definitely pro-life from conception to death, natural or otherwise. I definitely believe in upholding the personhood and the dignity of every person from conception to death. However, there is a massive, massive difference between saying being pro-life and not murdering innocent babies in the womb is completely different than saying this person who just shot 19 children and 2 adults in a school, that person deserves to die? That person needs to be taken out of society? No, that is not the same thing at all. And you can be completely anti-death penalty. That is fine. The church encourages that. But you cannot pretend like there's not a difference.
Greg Abbott has overseen 55 executions.
And Bill Barr actually,
55.
under his watch, the federal government began to execute prisoners for the first time since 2003.
But
so why are
Nancy
they weaponizing?
Nancy
She
Pelosi didn't
but
do
that's
that.
the point.
No, of course Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to do that. She had no part in that. She merely wants millions of innocent children to be slaughtered merely for existing.
But
Why
the
are they
church did that.
weaponizing? Why are they
that's the
weaponizing the
question.
sacrament against Nancy Pelosi, but not treating Bill Barr and Greg Abbott and other pro-death penalty politicians?
Because they're not the same thing.
This is how it becomes an issue. This is how abortion became an issue, because people forgot why it was put in place. It was not put in place to do anything but keep women safe and clean.
The legalization of abortion in the United States goes back to Margaret Sanger, who believed that black babies shouldn't exist.
It became about, well, my religion says that I shouldn't do this.
Right.
And the response to that is, okay, don't.
So when the Christian abolitionists all across Europe were arguing that their religion upheld the dignity of every human being and that slavery, particularly in the antebellum South, was completely evil and wrong, should the response have been, well, okay, don't?
You don't have to have an abortion.
And nobody said you must own a slave.
Let me out of here! I can't watch another second!
Alright, we're moving on to Nancy Pelosi herself, along with an introduction by a Joe I'd much rather not wake up with.
Here's something I bet you didn't know. My church, the Southern Baptist Church, was effectively pro-choice until 1980. This wasn't about Jesus. It was about politics.
Not surprising. Protestants gonna prot, you know.
That was the rise of the moral majority in 1980, bringing abortion politics into the pews of Republican-leaning churches.
So we're just gonna pretend like the Catholic Church has never been part of this fight? Or maybe like most people who oppose the Catholic Church, they get most of their information from 1920s KKK propaganda.
Now, the Catholic Church, mind you, has focused on abortion a bit longer.
Yeah, like 2,000 years longer. But thanks for the acknowledgement.
But how disconcerting that religious leaders in that church would deny communion to faithful members of their congregation over a political issue.
By supporting child murder, you are by definition not a faithful member of that church.
That Jesus never once mentioned in the Gospels.
He's got us there. If only there was a verse, or better yet, a passage about God's will for children and what he wants us to do in regard to them. There has to be a passage somewhere in the Bible. I just can't think of any. I guess he's right. Jesus never addressed this.
Now, Jesus did address most other things that touch our lives. And he told his disciples in Matthew 25 that we would be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven if we gave water to the thirsty, fed the hungry, clothed the poor, and brought hope to the hopeless.
Hey, the Catholic Church does that.
So how distressing that a religious leader would bar from communion a congregant who has spent her life supporting politics that focuses really on those truly disadvantaged.
Except for the unborn. She's cool with killing them.
Let's bring in now the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. What do you say to Catholics who see what's happening to you in San Francisco and wonders why you have an archbishop taking a step like this?
What's so sad about it, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking of some of the discussions I've had with other members of Congress over time. And what is important for women to know and families to know, that this is not just about terminating a pregnancy. So these same people are against contraception, family planning, in vitro fertilization. It's a blanket thing.
It's true. We oppose all those things too. And as a supposedly devout Catholic, she should be opposing these things right along with abortion.
So let's just say that I wonder about death penalty, which I am opposed to.
We've already discussed how death penalty and abortion, no matter where you land on the death penalty, they are not remotely comparable things. And how even though the current Pope and the current leaders of the church are more opposed to the death penalty, that is also a different matter than the unchanging, dogmatically defined issues of the church. But none of that matters here, because what Nancy Pelosi is doing is deflecting. She's trying to turn you away from her public, scandalous sins and point at someone else and go, hey, they should be punished if I'm getting punished. Well, even if it's true, even if people who support the death penalty should be denied communion, that doesn't change the fact that she is in mortal sin and shouldn't be taking communion.
I respect people's views about that, but I don't respect us foisting it onto others.
If you want to hide behind that garbage facade that you can keep your religion and your politics separate, even if you want to play that stupid game, you don't need to actively seek to legalize the murder of infants.
Our Archbishop has been vehemently against LGBTQ rights too. In fact, he led the way in some of the initiatives on the ballot in California.
Look, another area where you're openly in rebellion against the church.
So this decision taking us to privacy and precedent.
Not exactly a new precedent. I mean, the Pope has been doing that to lead wayward kings back into the fold for hundreds and hundreds of years.
I'm sorry your religion has been brought into this. Let's turn to the political side of this. And I'm concerned how we preserve all of our rights as women.
The rights of women? In the words of Matt Walsh, what is that?
The Senate voted on a piece of legislation that looked to expand abortion rights.
Do not call them abortion rights. Rights come from God, and you do not have the right to murder the innocent.
Well, I don't think they expanded abortion rights. What they did was to enshrine Roe v. Wade into the law. Enshrine Roe v. Wade into the law. And that's what we've done and how we did it right after the horrible decision in Texas to have vigilantes follow women around, all that.
Now that's a pretty public scandalous lie. Even if that's not technically a mortal sin, it's probably enough for her to get publicly reprimanded by her bishop.
This should never have been politicized. It should never have been politicized.
You're right. The humanity and the dignity and the personhood of the unborn should have been upheld by every single human being in the world since the founding of this country. But no, just like the Jews in Germany, just like the Africans brought over here as slaves, some group of people wanted to dehumanize another group of people. And that is what we're seeing today from people like Nancy Pelosi. This was a little bit of a spicy one, I admit that. Hopefully this is not the video that makes people run away in fear, but I'm not going to apologize for standing on the side of the unborn and to say that the Archbishop was quite right in telling Nancy Pelosi not to take communion. That said, I hope you liked it. Please give it a thumbs up, give me a comment, share, subscribe. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments. And if you want to donate to our Patreon because you want to keep supporting this content, I would really appreciate that and love you forever. Until next time. And remember, go to Mass. And remember, go to Mass. And remember, go to Mass.